At 75, I was thrown out into a freezing November storm after my daughter-in-law clutched her throat and cried, "I think your cough made me sick." My son pointed at the door and yelled, "Get out. You're a disease. Are you trying to kill my wife and child?" 30 minutes later, I was alone at a bus stop, soaked, without a coat, without a phone, with nowhere to go. Until the police found me unconscious, my son was stunned by the call he received. "Thank you for being here. It means more than you know." Now tell me something. What city are you watching from? What country? Leave it in the comments below. Let's see how far this story has traveled. Also, this story includes fictional elements added for educational purposes. Any resemblance to names or settings is purely coincidental, but everything it teaches you, that was always intentional. My name is Walter Hayes. I am 75 years old, and I need to tell you what happened the night my son looked me in the eye and called me a disease. It started at the dinner table, the way most things that destroy families do. November in Portland had been particularly cruel that year, not cold enough for snow, but wet enough to make you wish it would just commit. The flu had been tearing through the city for 3 weeks straight, an H3N2 strain that the local news anchors loved to say slowly, like the letters themselves were contagious. Neighbors were leaving grocery bags on each other's porches instead of knocking. My doctor had called twice to tell me to stay indoors. I was not worried. 75 years of breathing this city's air had given me a constitution that I was quietly proud of. I had eaten a full meal, taken my vitamins layered up every morning. I was fine. What I was not prepared for was Amber. She was already in the kitchen when I came downstairs that Friday evening, moving between the counter and the stove with a quiet efficiency that stopped me at the bottom of the stairs. In 8 months of living under my roof, 8 months of shared breakfasts and Sunday evenings and holidays, I had cooked for them both. Amber had never once set my place at the table. She had never poured anyone's water but her own. That evening my glass was already waiting, full, ice clinking softly against the sides. "Dinner's almost ready, Walter," she said, without turning around, her voice smooth and pleasant as a recorded greeting. "Brandon's on his way down." "Thank you, Amber," I said, "because my mother raised me to say thank you." I sat down. I looked at the glass. Then I looked at the back of her head, at the particular stillness of her shoulders, and I felt something I could not yet name move through me, like a cold draft through a room where all the windows are closed. Brandon came downstairs 2 minutes later, tie already loosened, jaw set tight. He dropped into his chair without looking at me and reached for the breadbasket like a man sitting down to paperwork. "Dad," he said, flat, economical. "Brandon," I replied and matched him note for note. Amber brought the plates out. Roasted chicken, some kind of grain she had been making lately, that I could never remember the name of. She settled into her chair and unfolded her napkin with the careful deliberateness of a woman who was tracking everything while appearing to track nothing at all. I ate. I drank from my glass. The water tasted like water. Then my throat started. Not a scratch, not the ordinary tickle of dry air or a swallowed wrong. Something deeper, a persistent climbing irritation that started below my sternum and worked its way upward no matter how many times I swallowed against it. I pressed my knuckles to my mouth, breathed through my nose, tried to wait it out. I could not wait it out. The cough that came out of me was rough and full-throated, the kind that echoes off walls and makes children look up from their plates. I grabbed my napkin and turned away from the table, eyes stinging with the effort of trying to contain what my body had already decided it was going to do. Brandon's chair hit the floor. When I turned back, he was standing, both hands gripping the edge of the table so hard, his knuckles had gone the color of bone. His eyes were fixed on me with an expression I had never seen directed at me by anyone in my life. Not a look of concern, not a look of surprise, but the wide, rigid stare of a man looking at something he has decided to be terrified of. Are you kidding me right now? His voice came out strangled, stretched tight over something that vibrated underneath it. Are you actually kidding me? Brandon, I choked on. You've been coughing for days. He pointed his finger at me and his hand was shaking. I heard you Tuesday night. I heard you Wednesday. I didn't say anything because I was trying to give you the benefit of the doubt, but this... He swept his hand toward me like he was indicating evidence. This is exactly what it looks like. I am not sick, I said. I kept my voice level. I have not been coughing for days. I swallowed water at the wrong angle. That is all that happened. That is not all that happened. His voice cracked on the last word, broke wide open, and what poured out of the crack was not anger, but something rawer and uglier. He stepped around the table toward me, and I held my ground, because I have never in my life backed away from my own kitchen. You go out every single day. You walk those streets. You touch things. You breathe the same air as every sick person in this city, and then you come back in here, and you sit down at our table like it's nothing. Brandon. I stood up. My knees ached the way they always do in November, but I stood up straight and I looked my son in the eye. This is my house, my table, my kitchen, and I will not be spoken to like a... You are a disease. The words tore out of him so loudly that Amber flinched backward in her chair, one hand flying to her mouth. Brandon's face had gone a dark, mottled red, and he was breathing hard, chest-heaving eyes bright and wet and wild. You want to kill my wife? You want to kill my child? Is that what this is? The room went very still. I stood there with my napkin still in my hand, and I looked at my son, really looked at him, and I felt something in my chest crack open quietly, the way old wood splits along a grain you never knew was there. 32 years. I had held that boy in the delivery room, with hands that were shaking so badly, the nurse had laughed kindly and told me to breathe. I had sat up with him through fevers and nightmares and the particular misery of being 13 years old. I had stood beside his mother's grave with him and felt his grief like it was my own. And he was standing in my kitchen, calling me a disease. Amber made a sound then. A soft, wounded sound low in her throat, and she pressed both hands flat against her stomach. Her eyes filled not quickly the way real tears come, but slowly, with the careful timing of a woman who understood exactly how long to let a moment breathe before she stepped into it. Brandon, she whispered, her voice trembling beautifully. I can already feel it. My throat. She looked at me and her eyes were glistening, and her chin was shaking, and her gaze was as steady and clear and cold as a winter river. I'm scared, Walter. I'm really scared. I looked at her for the long moment, at the tears that had appeared so precisely on cue, at the hands pressed so carefully against a stomach that 2 weeks ago she had told me held a child she was not yet sure existed. Amber, I said quietly, you do not have to perform for me. Her expression did not change, but something behind her eyes shifted a small, almost imperceptible adjustment, like a door closing a fraction of an inch. She stood up from the table and walked toward the kitchen. Unhurried, her footsteps soft and even on the hardwood floor. The steps of a woman who had known long before she sat down to dinner exactly how this evening was going to end. And that, more than the shouting, more than the pointed finger, more than the word disease still hanging in the air of my own kitchen, that was what told me that whatever was happening in this house had not started tonight. What happened in the next 10 minutes I have replayed in my head more times than I can count. Not because I am still trying to understand it, but because some things need to be remembered exactly as they were without softening, without the mercy of distance, so that you never make the mistake of forgetting what people are capable of. Brandon came into the hallway with my coat already in his hands. Not to give it to me, He held it at arm's length, dangling it by one sleeve like something he had fished out of a drain, and dropped it onto the floor at my feet. "You need to go," he said. "Tonight. Just for a few days until we know you're not contagious." I looked down at my coat on the floor. I had bought that coat 11 years ago on a Tuesday in October at a shop on Burnside that was gone now. Eleanor had told me the color made me look distinguished. I had worn it to her funeral. I did not pick it up. "Brandon." I kept my voice even the way you keep a flame low in a windstorm. "I need you to hear me very clearly. This is my house. I have owned it since 1991. My name, only my name, is on that deed, and I am not leaving it because I coughed at dinner." Brandon's face went through 3 expressions in 2 seconds: anger, something that flickered like guilt, then anger again, louder. "It's not about the cough, Dad. It's about Amber. It's about the baby. You want me to just sit here while you—" "There is no baby yet, Brandon." The words came out before I could weigh them. "She told me 2 weeks ago she was 8 weeks along. Last Thursday I heard her tell her friend on the phone she hadn't taken a test yet." The temperature in that hallway dropped about 10 degrees. Brandon's mouth opened. Nothing came out. His hands balled into fists at his sides, knuckles going pale, and he stared at me with an expression I had never seen on his face before. Not rage, not hurt, something that looked almost like being caught. Like a man reaching for something and finding empty air where he expected a wall. "You're calling her a liar." His voice had gone very quiet. That particular quiet that in my experience means a person is deciding something. "I am saying that I do not know the full picture," I said carefully. "And neither do you. And that is exactly why we need to sit down and—" "Get out." 2 words, simple as a door closing. "Brandon, get out of my house." His voice broke on the last word, cracking right down the middle, and his eyes went red and wet at the corners. Not from sadness. From the specific strain of a man forcing himself to do something his body knows is wrong. "I am done talking. I need you gone. Tonight." That was when Amber appeared at the top of the stairs. She came down slowly, one hand trailing along the banister, and she was crying, or performing crying, with such commitment that the difference had ceased to matter. Her shoulders shook. Her chin trembled. She had one hand pressed flat against her abdomen, and she was looking at me with an expression so precisely calibrated between fear and sorrow that it could have been painted. "Walter," she said softly, her voice breaking on the second syllable. "Please, I know this is hard, but I'm scared. I'm really genuinely scared, and I just need to know that my home is safe." She wiped at her eye with the back of her wrist, leaving a streak of mascara across her cheekbone that she did not bother to clean. "Can you understand that? Can you just give us this one thing?" I understood right then what I was looking at. I had lived 75 years on this earth. I had worked midnight shifts on empty streets, hauled a city's worth of discarded things through rain and cold, and the particular loneliness of 3 in the morning. I had sat with Eleanor through 4 rounds of chemotherapy and held her hand when the doctors stopped using the word remission. I had learned over the course of a long and honest life how to tell the difference between a person who is frightened and a person who has learned that frightened is a useful thing to appear. Amber was not frightened. Her eyes, even as her chin trembled and her shoulders heaved, were perfectly steady, clear and watchful, and already calculating the distance to the door. "I built this house into a home," I said. My voice did not shake, and I was grateful for that. I carried Eleanor over that threshold. I painted every room in this house with my own hands. I buried my wife from the living room of this house, and I kept the lights on every night after she was gone because I could not stand the dark. I looked at Brandon. "And you are asking me to leave it because your wife is performing grief at the top of my staircase." Brandon flinched. A full-body flinch like I had struck him. For 1/2 second I saw it, the boy I raised looking out from behind the man he had become, horrified at what that man was about to do. Then Amber made a sound. A small wounded sound right on cue, her hand pressing harder against her stomach. And just like that, the boy was gone. Brandon grabbed my arm. His grip was hard and desperate, and shaking the grip of a man who needed to finish something before he thought about it too carefully. He pulled me toward the front door, not forcefully, not violently, but with the grim, relentless momentum of someone who had made a decision and was now simply executing it. "Brandon, stop!" I did not fight him. Fighting would have made it easier for him. "Stop and look at me. Look at your father." He opened the front door. The rain came in immediately, cold and sideways, driven by the wind that funneled down our street every November, like it had a personal grievance. It hit my face and I gasped, the shock of it seizing my lungs. "Just a few days," Brandon said. His voice had gone hollow. He was not looking at me anymore. He was looking at a point somewhere above my left shoulder, and his jaw was working hard, and I understood that he was crying and refusing to let the tears fall. "Just until the doctor clears you. I'll call you tomorrow. I promise I'll call." He was still holding my arm. I looked down at his hand, the hand I had held crossing streets, the hand I had guided around the curves of a bicycle handlebar, the hand I had pressed between both of mine at Eleanor's graveside, while he sobbed in a way that I thought then meant he understood what it was to lose someone you could not imagine living without. "You will regret this," I said, not as a threat, as a simple fact, the way you tell someone it's going to rain. Brandon let go of my arm. He put both hands on my chest and pushed, not hard, not with violence, just with the flat, final pressure of a closed door. I stumbled back over the threshold, my heel catching the edge of the step, and I grabbed the porch railing with both hands to keep from falling. The rain soaked through my shirt in seconds, pressing the flannel flat against my skin, cold enough to make my breath come in short, sharp pulls. I turned around. Brandon stood in the doorway, lit from behind by the warm gold of my hallway. The hallway with the coat rack I had built myself and the photo of Eleanor on the wall that he had walked past every day for 8 months without once stopping to look at it. He could not meet my eyes. I heard Amber's footsteps on the stairs, unhurried, soft, descending, now that the hard part was done. I saw her hand appear at Brandon's shoulder. I saw the corner of her mouth just visible past his arm, curve upward, a fraction. A small private smile of the kind a person only makes when they believe no one is watching. The door closed. The deadbolt turned. The porch light went out. I stood in the dark on the porch of the house I had owned for 33 years, rain running into my collar and down the back of my neck, wearing a flannel shirt and house slippers with no phone, no wallet, and nothing in my pockets but my hands. I stood there for a moment, just breathing. Then I walked down the steps and turned left toward the street, because a man does not beg at a door that has been locked against him. Down at the far end of the block, half hidden in the spray of a street lamp, I could just make out a figure in an orange reflective vest pushing a municipal cleaning cart through the rain. He did not see me, but I noticed him. I turned my collar up against the wet and kept walking. And somewhere between the end of my front path and the first crack in the sidewalk, the question that had been sitting at the back of my mind since I sat down to dinner finally moved to the front. Why had Amber poured my water? In 8 months she had never done it before. The rain did not care that I was 75 years old. It came down in sheets, driven sideways by the November wind that funneled through Portland's streets, like it had a personal grievance against anyone foolish enough to be outside. Within 30 seconds of leaving my porch, my flannel shirt was plastered flat against my skin. Within a minute, I could not feel my fingers. I kept walking. I had nowhere to go. That is the honest truth of it. No phone, no wallet, no keys. Brandon had made sure of all 3 before he put his hands on my chest and pushed. What I had was a pair of house slippers that were soaking through with every step and the particular stubbornness of a man who has spent 30 years pushing a cleaning cart through the worst hours of the night and learned that the only way out of the dark is straight through it. The streets were nearly empty. Portland, under a flu warning on a rainy Friday night, has a specific kind of quiet, not peaceful, but sealed like a city holding its breath. Porch lights burned behind drawn curtains. Cars sat unmoving in driveways. The only sounds were the rain hammering the pavement and the distant moan of a bus somewhere on Burnside that I could hear but not see. My knee started hurting around the second block. The left one always goes first in the cold, an old injury from a night shift in 2009 when I hit a patch of black ice on the Morrison Bridge and went down hard. I gritted my teeth and walked through it the way I had walked through it 100 times before. By the fourth block, I was shivering hard enough that my jaw ached from clenching it shut. I turned toward Maggie's house out of pure reflex. Maggie Brooks, my neighbor of 19 years, a retired school teacher who grew tomatoes in the summer and left soup on my porch when Eleanor was sick. Her lights were on. Warm yellow light behind the front curtain, the kind that promises coffee and a dry chair. I made it halfway up her front path before I saw the sign taped to the inside of her storm door, hand-lettered in thick black marker. Immunocompromised. Please do not knock. Deliveries on step. Thank you. I stopped. My chest ached with something that had nothing to do with the cold. Maggie was 81. Her husband had died of pneumonia 3 winters ago. If I pounded on her door, looking the way I looked, soaked gray, shaking, she would be terrified. And in the middle of a flu season, a stranger at the door was the last thing a woman her age needed, even if that stranger had eaten Thanksgiving dinner at her table for 15 years. I turned around and walked back to the street. "Keep moving, Walter," I said out loud, because there was no one to hear me and my voice was the only warm thing I had left. "Keep your feet moving, and the rest will follow." My slippers were disintegrating. I could feel the sole of the left one separating from the upper, flapping with every step like something trying to break free. The rain had gotten into my collar and was running straight down my spine in a thin, relentless stream. I thought about Eleanor. I thought about the way she used to wait up for me when I worked the late shift, sitting in the kitchen with a cup of tea that had gone cold, because she always misjudged when I'd be home, and how she would look up when I came through the door and say, "There you are," like she had been holding some small part of herself in reserve until I walked in and she could finally let it go. "There you are," I said to the rain. My voice cracked on the last word, and I was not ashamed of it. I do not know how long I walked. Time does a strange thing when your body is shutting down. It stretches and compresses in ways that have nothing to do with clocks. I remember passing a laundromat that was still lit up warm air, ghosting through the gap under its door, and thinking that I could go in, stand near the machines for a few minutes, just long enough to stop shaking. But there were people inside. 2 women folding clothes, a teenager on his phone. And I was a soaking wet old man in house slippers with no wallet, and nowhere to explain myself to, and my pride, that last stubborn, unreasonable thing, would not let me walk through that door. I found the bus shelter at the corner of Morrison and 5th by feel more than sight. My eyes had started doing something strange, blurring at the edges, the streetlights smearing into long yellow streaks. I sat down on the plastic bench, and the cold of it came through my pants instantly, but my legs had started trembling in a way that felt less like shivering and more like failing, and sitting down was no longer a choice so much as something my body had decided for me. I pressed my back against the wall of the shelter, tried to breathe slowly, counted the cracks in the sidewalk across the street until the numbers stopped making sense. "Eleanor," I said. My lips were numb enough that the word came out wrong, slurred at the edges. I think I made a mess of things. I closed my eyes for just a moment. Just one moment, I told myself. Just long enough to gather something back. The last thing I felt before the darkness came up to meet me Was the rain still falling indifferent as ever? And somewhere at the back of my fading mind, a question that refused to let go even as everything else slipped away. Why did she pour my water? The light hit me before the sound did. A hard white beam sweeping across my face, pulling me up through layers of dark and cold like a hook through water. My first thought was that Eleanor had left the bedroom lamp on again. She always did when she stayed up reading past midnight, the light spilling into the hallway and finding me on my way to the bathroom. My second thought, arriving a half-second later, with all the mercy of a cold shower, was that Eleanor had been gone for 5 years, and I was not in my bedroom. I was on a bench in the rain, and something was very wrong with my hands. "Sir?" A voice close and firm. "Sir, can you hear me?" I tried to lift my head and discovered that my neck had made its own separate agreement with gravity. My fingers, when I attempted to move them, responded with a deep, burning protest that told me they had been still and cold for too long. "Sir, I need you to stay with me." The voice again younger than I expected, with the particular controlled steadiness of someone trained to keep calm while everything around them is not. A light in my eyes, gentler now. "Can you tell me your name?" "Walter," I said. The word came out wrong, thick and slow, like pushing something heavy through a narrow door. "Walter Hayes." A pause, brief, but I felt it. "Walter Hayes," the voice repeated. Different now. Something had shifted in it, not the professional calm of a first responder managing an unknown situation, but something more personal, more careful. Employee ID 4471, Portland Sanitation Department. I forced my eyes to focus. The face above me was a man in his late 30s, dark jacket badge catching the light, a scar cutting through his left eyebrow in a thin diagonal line. He was crouched in front of me with one hand extended, not quite touching my arm, and he was looking at me with an expression I could not immediately read, somewhere between disbelief and something that looked almost like relief. "You found my card," I said, "in your shirt pocket." He held up my city ID between 2 fingers. "I was looking for next of kin, but then I looked at your face." He exhaled one long, slow breath through his nose. "I've been looking at your face in my memory for 12 years, Mr. Hayes. I just didn't know your name." I stared at him. "12 years ago," he said. "November just like tonight. I was a rookie, 2 years on the force. I was chasing a suspect through the Buckman neighborhood drug dealer known to carry. He turned down an alley off Southeast Ash and I followed him in." He paused and something moved across his face, old pain, the kind that has been examined so many times. It has worn smooth at the edges. "He was waiting for me. I took a knife to the right side here." He touched his ribs briefly. "Hit the ground. He ran. And I was lying on the pavement of that alley at 2 in the morning thinking, this is how it ends. This is actually how it ends for me." And then I heard wheels. I felt something move through my chest. Not a physical sensation. Something older. "A cleaning cart," Derek said. That specific sound metal wheels on wet asphalt at 2 in the morning. And then a flashlight in my face and a voice saying, "Son, I've got you. Don't you close your eyes on me." "You were losing a lot of blood," I said. My voice came out quieter than I meant it to. Derek's jaw tightened hard. He looked down at the ground for a moment, and when he looked back up and his eyes were bright in a way that had nothing to do with the streetlight. "By the time the ambulance got there, you had your hand pressed against my side, and you were still talking to me, counting backwards from 100 to keep me conscious. When the paramedics took over, I tried to ask your name, and you were already gone." He let out a short, rough sound that was almost a laugh. "I asked my supervisor the next day if anyone knew who the sanitation worker was on that route. He said he'd look into it. He never did." I looked at this man, this stranger who was not a stranger, crouched in front of me in the rain, with my identification card in his hand, and 12 years of a debt he had never been able to repay sitting in his eyes. My throat tightened in a way that had nothing to do with the cold or the cough or anything that had happened at the dinner table 2 hours ago. "You were 26 years old," I said. "You had a photo in your front pocket. A little boy, maybe 3 years old, in a baseball uniform." Derek's breath caught. His hand finally made contact with my arm, a brief, hard grip, the kind that communicates things that words cannot manage. "That's Leo. He's 15 now. Plays varsity basketball." His voice broke on the last word just slightly, and he pressed his mouth together hard before continuing. "He wouldn't be here without you, Mr. Hayes. I want you to understand that. He would not be on this earth." I did not say anything for a moment. I let those words settle where they needed to settle. "Help me up," I said finally. Derek stood immediately, both hands out, steady and sure. He took my weight without flinching as I got my feet under me, and when my knees buckled on the first attempt, he held on without comment and waited for me to try again. I made it upright on the second try. My slippers were destroyed. The rain was still coming down. I was soaking wet and 75 years old and standing on a street corner in the dark, and I felt for the first time since the porch light had gone out behind me like I was not entirely alone. "I need to get you somewhere warm," Derek said, his hand still steadying my arm. "I can take you to the hospital or I can take you home. Your address is on the—" "Not home," I said. The words came out harder than I intended. Derek looked at me and I held his gaze. "My son put me out. Tonight. That is why I am here." Derek went very still. "He put you out," he said slowly. "In this." "In this," I confirmed. Derek looked down the street in the direction of my house. His jaw worked. A muscle jumped in his cheek the way it does in a man who is choosing very carefully between the thing he wants to say and the thing he is going to say instead. "Is there somewhere else?" he asked. "Anywhere you want to go." I thought for 3 seconds. I thought about Raymond. I thought about Frank. I thought about the question that had been following me through the rain for the past 3 hours, and the answer I suspected was waiting for me on the other side of it. "There's a hotel on Southwest Broadway," I said. "The Heathman. I have a credit card number memorized. 30 years of memorizing things in the dark tends to stick." Derek nodded once, like a man receiving orders he fully intends to carry out. He opened the back door of the cruiser, and the heat that rolled out of it hit me like a wall, painful and wonderful, in equal measure, the way warmth always feels when you have been without it long enough to forget it existed. I lowered myself onto the seat. Derek closed the door, walked around to the driver's side, and pulled away from the curb without turning on the siren. Smooth and quiet, the way you drive when the person in the back seat has already been through enough noise for one night. We were 3 blocks from the hotel when Derek reached for his radio, then stopped. He set it back in the cradle and looked at me in the rearview mirror instead. "Mr. Hayes," he said, "I have to ask. Do you want me to contact your son, let him know you're safe?" I looked at the rain streaking down the window, at the lights of the city blurring past. "Yes," I said, "but not yet." I paused. Let him wonder for a little while first. Derek's eyes in the mirror held something that on a younger face I might have called satisfaction. "Yes, sir," he said, and drove. The Heathman Hotel on Southwest Broadway had been standing since 1927, and it had the particular dignity of a building that has seen enough of Portland's history to not be surprised by anything. The front desk clerk did not blink at a soaking wet old man in destroyed slippers reciting a credit card number from memory at 11 o'clock on a Friday night. She handed me a key card and pointed to the elevator like it was the most ordinary thing in the world, and I could have kissed her for it. Derek had waited in the lobby while I changed into the hotel robe. The front desk had found me dry clothes from Lost and found a pair of sweatpants and a gray pullover that were 2 sizes too large and the most comfortable things I had worn in years. When I came back down, he was sitting in one of the leather chairs by the window, with his elbows on his knees and his hands clasped together, staring at the floor with the expression of a man working through something that does not have a clean resolution. "You don't have to stay," I told him. "I know," he said, and did not move. We went up to the room. Derek stood near the window while I sat on the edge of the bed, and for a moment, we were just two men on a rainy Friday night, trying to figure out what the right next step looked like. Before he left, Derek set his personal cell phone on the nightstand beside me. "Keep it tonight," he said. "Raymond's number is already in the contacts. Call him as soon as you're warm enough to think straight." "I have to make the call," Derek said. "Protocol. I found you. I have to notify next of kin." He looked at me directly. "But you can be in the room when I do it." My heart clenched so hard it nearly took my breath. "Put it on speaker," I said. "I want to hear his voice." Derek dialed. The phone rang 4 times. Then Brandon picked up his voice tight and high the way it gets when he is pretending not to be frightened. "Hello? Mr. Hayes, this is Officer Derek Cole with Portland PD. I'm calling regarding your father, Walter Hayes. We found him tonight at the Morrison and 5th bus shelter. He's safe and warm. I need to inform you—" Oh, one word. Flat. And then a pause that lasted 2 full seconds too long. "Is he? How bad is it?" "He's stable," Derek said. "Mild hypothermia, but he's recovering well. I'd like to have you come in so we can—" "Officer?" Brandon's voice shifted lower now, smoother, the voice of a man who is prepared for this conversation. "I have to be honest with you. My father has been showing signs of cognitive decline for several months. Memory issues, confusion, mood swings. Tonight he became very agitated at dinner, and he walked out. We tried to stop him. My wife is pregnant, and we were terrified, but he was insisting on leaving, and we couldn't physically." I pressed my fist against my mouth, hard. My eyes burned, and I refused to let them do what they wanted to do. "Sir," Derek said, and his voice had gone very quiet. "Your father was found in 48-degree rain wearing a flannel shirt and house slippers. No coat, no phone, no wallet." A pause. "Can you explain that?" He must have gone out before we could get his things together." Brandon's voice developed a crack in it, expertly placed, the kind of crack that in a different context would sound like grief. "We feel terrible. We've been trying to manage this on our own, but it's been so hard, especially with the baby coming, and we didn't know he would get that far that fast. We need you to come to the Heathman on Southwest Broadway to—" "I can't. Fast. Too fast. Officer, my wife is high risk. She cannot be exposed to a hospital environment right now. And honestly, I don't think bringing him back here is the right call either. He needs professional care, a facility where they can monitor him properly. We love him, but we're not equipped to keep him safe at home anymore." The room felt like all the air had been removed from it. "A facility," Derek repeated. His jaw was so tight I could see the muscle jumping in his cheek from across the room. "I know it sounds harsh," Brandon said, and his voice went soft and sorrowful in a way that made my stomach turn, "but we have to think about what's best for him, and for our baby. I'm sure you understand." Derek looked at me. His eyes were burning with something that was not quite anger and not quite sorrow, but lived somewhere in the neighborhood of both. I shook my head once. "Keep going," I told him without words. "Let him finish." "Mr. Hayes," Derek said, "I want to be very clear with you. Your father is alert-oriented and fully coherent. He knows exactly where he is, what day it is, and what happened tonight. There is no indication of cognitive decline." Another pause. "What there is indication of is that a 75-year-old man was put outside in a November rainstorm without a coat or a phone, and that his son, when notified, suggested a care facility instead of coming to make sure he was breathing. The line went quiet. Then Brandon said, voice stripped of all its careful performance, "I'll have to call you back." The call ended. Derek set the phone down on the dresser and turned to face me. His hands were clenched at his sides, knuckles gone pale, and he was breathing through his nose with the controlled deliberateness of a man managing a very strong feeling. "Mr. Hayes," he said, his voice rough at the edges, "I am so sorry." My eyes were burning hard now, and I let them just for a moment, just enough to acknowledge that what I had just heard was real, and it had come from my son's mouth, and it had cost me something I was not sure I could name yet. "Don't be sorry," I said. My voice held. Barely, but it held. "Be useful." I looked up at him. "Because I have some phone calls to make, and I'm going to need a piece of paper." Derek pulled a notepad off the nightstand, without being asked, and handed it to me, and I started writing, before the page had fully settled in my lap. 3 names. 3 numbers I had carried in my head for years, the way you carry the things that matter most, not written down anywhere, just held close and quiet, in the place where you keep the things you might someday need. Raymond Gill was first on the list. By 12:30 in the morning, the rain had finally decided it had made its point and pulled back to a drizzle. I sat on the edge of the Heathman's bed with the notepad on my knee, and Derek in the armchair by the window, his jacket off, now sleeves rolled, looking like a man who had accepted that he was not going home anytime soon. I dialed Raymond's number from memory. It rang twice. Raymond Gill. Wide awake, sharp as a blade, like the man had been sitting in his office waiting for exactly this kind of call since approximately 1987. "Ray," I said. "It's Walter, I need you." A beat. "Talk to me." I gave him the short version. 4 minutes start to finish the dinner, the cough, the door, the rain, the bus shelter, the hotel. When I got to the part about Brandon's phone call, Raymond made a sound low in his throat that I had only heard him make twice before, both times in a courtroom, when opposing counsel said something that crossed a line Raymond considered fundamental. He suggested a care facility, Raymond said. Flat, precise, the voice he uses when he is deciding something. "Those were his exact words," I said. "And this was after you were found in 48-degree rain without a coat." "Correct. Walter." Raymond's voice shifted, still professional but warmer underneath. "Are you hurt?" "Cold," I said, angry, thinking very clearly. "Good." I heard the sound of a lamp clicking on papers moving. "Then tell me what you want. Full measure or something more restrained?" I looked at Derek across the room. He was watching me with the quiet attention of a man who understands that some decisions need to be witnessed. "Full measure," I said. Raymond exhaled not a sigh, but the breath of a man who has been waiting for permission to do what he does best. "All right. Walk me through the assets. What does Brandon have access to right now?" "Joint checking account I added him 4 years ago for emergencies. About 14,000 in it currently. He also has a supplementary credit card on my main account. The limit is 8,000. I can have a freeze request at the bank by 6 a.m., Raymond said. "As the primary account holder, you have the right to freeze any joint account unilaterally. The bank will restrict all access, including Brandon's card, pending your instruction. He won't be able to touch a dollar." "Do it," I said. "The house is his name on the deed. Never has been." I felt something settle in my chest as I said it, a quiet, solid feeling, like a foundation being confirmed. I promised him I'd add him after Eleanor passed. I never did. Something kept stopping me. Good instincts. Raymond's pen was moving, I could hear it. "What about the insurance policy, the Sun Life one?" Derek's head came up slightly. I had not mentioned insurance to him. 80,000 a year in premiums for 30 years, I said. The payout is 800,000. Brandon was the primary beneficiary until 6 months ago. The pen stopped moving. "Until 6 months ago," Raymond repeated carefully. "The day Amber moved her boxes into Eleanor's sewing room, without asking me, I said, I called Sun Life and changed the beneficiary to the Morrison Bridge Community Fund. a local charity that provides overnight shelter and meals for unhoused workers. Eleanor used to volunteer there on Thursday evenings. Derek was looking at me now with an expression I could not fully read, something between astonishment and the particular respect a person feels when they realize they have underestimated someone. "Brandon doesn't know," Raymond said. It was not a question. "He knows I have a policy," I said. "He does not know the amount, and he does not know I changed it." Raymond let out a breath that carried 30 years of legal experience in it. "Walter, you understand that if he has been operating under the assumption that he stands to inherit that money, then tonight makes a great deal more sense," I said. "Yes, I've been sitting here doing that math for the last hour." "All right." Raymond's voice went very crisp. "One more thing. The house you have that security camera system you installed 2 years ago. The one you called me about when you thought the package thief was back." "Still running," I said. "Full coverage. Living room, kitchen, hallway, front and back exterior." "Does it cover the kitchen specifically, the counter area near the sink?" Something about the precision of that question made the hair on my arms stand up. "It covers the entire kitchen," I said slowly. "Why?" "Because before we do anything else tomorrow morning," Raymond said, "I need you to pull that footage, starting from 5 p.m. today, before dinner." His voice was careful now, deliberate the way he gets when he is following a thread he is not yet ready to name out loud. "Walter, how long has Amber been the one preparing your meals?" My mouth went dry. "The past 3 months," I said. "She offered. I thought she was being kind. And tonight specifically, did anyone pour your water before you sat down?" The question dropped into the room like a stone into still water. I sat there on the edge of that hotel bed and felt every separate hair on my arms stand at full attention, because I had been carrying that question since the moment I left my front porch, and hearing Raymond ask it, hearing it come from the outside, from someone who did not know the answer, made it suddenly terribly specific. "Amber did?" I said. She had never done it before, not once in 8 months. Raymond did not respond immediately. I heard him write something on his notepad, a long line like underlining. "Pull that footage first thing tomorrow, Walter," he said quietly, "before you do anything else. And call me the moment you've seen it." I said I would. We confirmed the 6 a.m. freeze request. We said goodnight. I set the phone down on the nightstand and looked at Derek, who was sitting forward in his chair with both elbows on his knees. "What did she put in your water?" he asked. "I don't know yet," I said. "But you think she put something in it?" I looked at the window, at the drizzle catching the light from the street below. "I think," I said carefully, "that a woman who has never once poured my water chose tonight of all nights to start. And I think I need to find out why before I do anything else." Derek nodded slowly, his jaw tight, his eyes sharp. "I'll be back at 7, he said, standing. "I know someone in the department who handles elder abuse cases. Just in case." He picked up his jacket and moved toward the door, and I watched him go with the specific gratitude of a man who understands what it means to have someone choose to stay in your corner. The door closed softly behind him. I turned off the lamp and lay back on top of the covers, fully dressed, staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow I was going to look at that footage, and whatever it showed me, I was going to be ready for it. I hadn't slept. Not even close. The iPad that Linda left on the nightstand had been sitting there for 3 hours, its screen going dark every few minutes, then lighting back up every time I shifted against the headboard. My ribs still ached where I had hit the sidewalk. My left hand still had a tremor that hadn't been there before Friday night. But none of that mattered right now. What mattered was the app. Raymond had walked me through it over the phone at 2 in the morning, slow, patient, the way he always talked when the stakes were high. "Walter, the system backs up 72 hours of footage automatically. Kitchen, living room, front door, back hallway. You installed it yourself in 2022, remember? It's all still there. Log in with your email and the password you gave me years ago." I had typed the password with shaking fingers. 3 tries before I got it right. Now, at 6:12 a.m., I was staring at the kitchen camera timestamp, Friday, November 8th, 5:49 p.m., 17 minutes before I came downstairs for dinner. I pressed play. The kitchen was empty at first. The pot roast was in the oven, the timer blinking green on the counter. Then Amber walked in from the hallway, moving quickly, glancing back over her shoulder toward the staircase. My heart started knocking hard against my chest. She went straight to the cabinet above the refrigerator, the one I used for vitamins and supplements. She stood on her toes, pulled something down. A small, amber-colored bottle. She turned it over in her palm, twice looked at the label, then walked to the table and picked up the glass of water she had already set at my place. "Oh, Lord," I whispered. My voice came out cracked and small in that hotel room like something breaking under pressure. She tipped the bottle over the glass. Not a lot, just a few drops, the kind of careful measurement that told me this was not the first time she had thought about the exact amount. She swirled the glass once with one finger, set it back down, then put the bottle in her cardigan pocket and walked out of the kitchen like she had simply come in to check on the roast. 40 seconds. The whole thing took 40 seconds. My hand was shaking so badly I nearly dropped the iPad. I pressed pause, pressed it again. Rewound. Watched it a second time and a third. And each time I watched it, the shaking got worse, not from cold, not from sickness, but from something deeper and uglier that I didn't have a name for yet. I called Derek. He picked up on the second ring voice alert like he hadn't been sleeping either. "Walter, you okay?" "No." I pressed my fist against my mouth for a second before I could keep talking. "Derek, I need you to listen to me. I'm watching the kitchen camera from last night. Amber, she put something in my water before dinner. I watched her do it. I watched her measure it out, Derek. She stood on her toes to get to my supplement cabinet and I stopped. My throat had closed up completely. "Walter." Derek's voice dropped low and steady, the same tone he used at accident scenes. "Don't touch anything. Don't close the app. What time is the timestamp on that footage?" 5:49 p.m. That's 40 minutes before you started coughing at the table. The air went out of me. I hadn't even made that connection until he said it out loud. 40 minutes. Enough time for whatever she put in that glass to reach my throat, my lungs make me hack and gasp, and sound to every person sitting at that table like a sick old man spreading disease through a house full of healthy people. "She planned it," I said. My voice had gone flat. "Derek, she planned the whole thing. I know." A pause. "Walter, is Linda still in the building?" "I think she's on shift downstairs. Go get her. Right now. I need a witness in that room with you while you keep watching that footage. Nobody touches that iPad. Nobody screenshots anything without a timestamp and a witness present. Can you do that?" I was already moving bare feet on the hotel carpet knees, protesting every step. I pulled the door open and nearly ran straight into Linda Marsh, who was standing in the hallway with 2 cups of coffee and a look on her face like she had been standing there debating whether to knock. "I was coming to check on you," she said. Then she saw my face. Her eyes went wide. "Walter, what happened?" "Come inside," I said, and closed the door. She set the coffees on the dresser and sat beside me on the edge of the bed while I played the footage for her from the beginning. I watched her face as she watched the screen, watched her expression go from curious to confused to something tight and horrified as Amber's hand tilted that bottle over my glass. "That's," Linda started. 40 minutes before I started coughing at dinner," I said. Linda pressed her hand flat against her chest. "Walter, that's not an accident. That's not paranoia. That is deliberate." Her voice had gone shaky. "I need to call the hotel's on-call medical liaison. We document this right now, what you showed me, the timestamp, the footage. If that substance caused respiratory irritation in a 75-year-old man with your medical history, that is not just a family dispute." I looked at the frozen image on the screen, Amber's hand, the bottle, my glass of water sitting there full and cold and waiting. My eyes were burning. I was not going to cry. I had made that decision somewhere around 3 a.m., somewhere between the second and third time I watched my son's wife poison my drink with calm, practiced hands. But my chest felt like something had reached inside and was slowly, methodically squeezing everything it could find. She made me cough, I said. She made me sound sick, and then Brandon used it to throw me out of my own house. Linda put her hand over mine. Her grip was firm and warm. Then we make sure every second of that footage is preserved, she said. And we make sure the right people see it. On the iPad, the timestamp read 5:49 p.m. The kitchen was empty now on screen. The glass of water sitting at my chair, still and clear and full of something that was never meant to help me. My phone buzzed. Raymond. Walter, I pulled the property records. You need to see this. Call me. Raymond was already talking when I picked up, his voice clipped and rapid the way it got when he had been up all night reading documents. The house is still in your name, Walter. 100%. Brandon never filed for a title transfer. Either he didn't know how, or he assumed you'd just sign it over eventually. Either way, legally, you own every square foot of that building. They have no right to be there. I sat down on the edge of the bed. My legs had stopped holding me properly about an hour ago. Raymond, I said, I need you to hear something before we talk about the house. I told him about the kitchen footage, about the bottle, about the 40-second sequence that had changed the shape of everything I thought I understood about Friday night. I heard him breathe in slowly on the other end, heard a long pause where I could almost feel him reassembling his understanding of the situation, the same way I had been reassembling mine since 6 in the morning. That footage needs to go to Derek today, Raymond said. Not tomorrow, today. And Walter, don't stop at the kitchen camera. Pull every angle from that night, living room, front hallway, all of it. I already had the app open. I'm looking right now. I switched to the living room camera. The timestamp on the earliest usable clip read Friday, November 8th, 10:17 p.m. 2 hours after Brandon had pushed me out the front door into the rain. 2 hours after I had been walking alone down wet Portland streets with no coat, no phone, no idea where I was going. I pressed play. The living room of my own house, my couch, my bookshelves, my late wife Eleanor's ceramic lamp on the side table was full of people I had never seen before. 6 of them, maybe 7, crowded around the coffee table, with bottles of wine and a pizza box, and music playing low from the Bluetooth speaker Brandon had bought with my credit card last Christmas. My jaw tightened. Brandon was laughing at something on his phone, leaning back in my armchair with his feet on my coffee table. But it was Amber who stopped my breath entirely. She was standing in the center of the room in a red dress, holding a glass of wine in each hand, and she was laughing so hard she had to bend forward, bracing one hand on her knee. Not nervous laughter. Not relieved laughter. The kind of full-body, unguarded laughter that only happens when someone has been waiting a very long time for something, and it has finally arrived exactly the way they planned. One of the guests, a woman in a yellow sweater I didn't recognize, raised her glass and said something. The audio on the camera was thin, but the app had a noise enhancement feature that Raymond had told me about. I turned it on. The woman in yellow said, "To the new house," and the room erupted. My hand tightened on the iPad until my knuckles went white. Then Amber set both wine glasses down on my coffee table, pressed her hands flat against her stomach. The same stomach she had clutched Friday night, wailing about her baby, about her health, about the disease she claimed I was carrying, and looked straight across the room at Brandon, with a grin that could have cut glass. "Finally," she said. Her voice came through the enhanced audio sharp and clear as a bell. "That old man dying out there means we are finally free." The room laughed again. Brandon raised his glass. I stopped the video. I sat there on the edge of that hotel bed, in a room that was not mine, wearing clothes that Linda had scrounged from a lost-and-found bin downstairs, and I felt something move through me that I had never quite felt before. Not anger. I knew anger, had lived with anger plenty of times in my life. This was something colder, something that settled into the base of my spine and didn't shake. Linda was watching me from the chair across the room. She had seen my face change. "Walter," she said quietly, "what did you find?" I turned the iPad around and played it from the beginning of the living room clip. I watched her watch it. Watched her press her hand over her mouth when Amber said the line about the old man dying. Watched her eyes fill with something furious and wet. "She said that while you were unconscious at a bus stop in the rain," Linda said. Her voice was shaking. "She stood in your living room in your house and she said that." "Yes," I said. Brandon raised his glass. "Yes." Linda stood up abruptly, walked to the window, put both hands on the sill. Her shoulders were tight, her breathing audible. "I need a minute," she said, "because if I don't take a minute, I am going to say something very loud and very unprofessional." I understood that feeling completely. I called Derek and played him the audio clip over the phone. There was a long stretch where I could hear street noise on his end, the sound of a car door, then traffic, and then his voice came back hard and even. "Walter, how quickly can Raymond file a formal eviction notice?" "He said 72 hours for the paperwork. Then we start today." A pause. "Walter, you've got kitchen footage showing premeditated contamination of your food and living room footage showing them celebrating your removal from your own home. That's not a family argument anymore. That's a case." My throat tightened. I looked down at the iPad in my lap, at the frozen image of my living room full of strangers and two people I had trusted with the roof over my head. "Raymond," I said when he picked up the next call, "how fast can we move?" His answer made something in my chest unclench for the first time in 36 hours. "Faster than they expect," he said. Raymond's office smelled like old paper and strong coffee. The kind of place that hadn't changed its furniture since the 90s and didn't intend to. I had been inside these walls more times than I could count, for Eleanor's estate paperwork, for my retirement documents, for every piece of legal business I had ever needed a steady hand to guide me through. Sitting across from Raymond now with a borrowed coat over my shoulders and Linda's iPad on the table between us, I felt something I hadn't felt in 36 hours. I felt like I had ground under my feet again. "All right," Raymond said, spreading 3 documents flat on the desk, his reading glasses pushed up on his forehead. "Here's where we are. The house is yours, clean title, your name, only no co-signers, no transfer on record. Brandon has 0 legal claim to that property." "He doesn't know that," I said. "No, he doesn't." Raymond looked at me over the rim of his glasses with the quiet satisfaction of a man who had been waiting to say the next part. "Which means every day he sits in that house thinking it's his, he's trespassing." My chest tightened, not with pain this time, but with something that felt almost like oxygen returning to a room that had been sealed shut. "What's the first move?" I asked. Raymond tapped the top document. "I filed an emergency motion first thing this morning to freeze the joint checking account you share with Brandon, the one you co-signed when he was 22 and needed help getting on his feet. Judge Hartwell approved it by mid-morning. Elder financial abuse cases with documented fraud evidence move faster than most people expect. As of right now, neither Brandon nor Amber can access a single dollar in that account." I put both hands flat on my knees to stop them from shaking. "How much is in there?" $14,600. Most of it your direct deposit from the city pension going in every month for the last 3 years. Raymond's jaw tightened. "Walter, he's been pulling from that account regularly. Groceries, gas, Amber's salon supply orders. He's been living off your pension for at least 18 months. The air went out of me like I'd been hit. 18 months, I said. At minimum. Raymond pulled a printed bank statement from the folder and turned it to face me. Highlighted in yellow withdrawal after withdrawal, none of them mine. I'm going to need you to confirm which of these transactions you authorized. I looked down the list. My finger moved slowly down the page, and with each line it shook a little harder. $140 at a restaurant I had never been to. $312 at a furniture store. $68 at a wine shop the week after they told me they were cutting back on spending. None of them, I said. My voice came out very quiet and very even. Raymond, I didn't authorize a single one of these. Raymond nodded like he had already known the answer. Then we have grounds for financial elder abuse under Oregon Statute 124.110. That's civil and potentially criminal. He capped his pen. I'm also filing the formal notice of trespass on the property today. Certified mail, hand-delivered copy, the whole package. Brandon will have it by Monday morning. My phone rang. Derek. Walter. He was outdoors somewhere, wind cutting across the line. I just drove past the house. Both cars in the driveway. Lights on. They don't know yet. They will by Monday, I said. Good. A beat. How are you holding up? I looked around Raymond's office at the stacked folders, the framed law school diploma on the wall, the window that looked out over a wet Portland Saturday, where ordinary people were walking dogs and buying coffee and living their ordinary lives, completely unaware that a 75-year-old man in a borrowed coat was quietly taking back everything that had been stolen from him. I'm standing, I said. That's enough for right now. Derek made a sound that wasn't quite a laugh, but was close to one. You know what I keep thinking about that night on Burnside Street, 12 years ago? You dragged me behind a parked car and held pressure on my side for 20 minutes until the ambulance came. You kept talking to me the whole time, kept saying, "Stay with me, son. Stay with me." My throat closed up. Derek, you stayed with me that night, Walter. I'm staying with you now. His voice went firm. Whatever you need, whatever it takes. I pressed my hand over my eyes for a moment. They were burning again, and this time I couldn't entirely stop what came with it. One hard exhale that wasn't quite a sob, but was the closest thing to it I had allowed myself since Friday. Raymond pretended to be very interested in his documents. There's one more thing, Raymond said after a moment, his voice gentler now. The life insurance policy, Sun Life policy number ending in 4471. The current beneficiary is still Brandon. I know, I said. I want to change it. Raymond was already sliding the form across the desk. I thought you might. I picked up the pen. My hand steadied as I wrote. The Morrison Bridge Community Fund. Every cent. I signed my name and set the pen down, and for the first time since Friday night, I felt something that resembled peace settle somewhere behind my ribs. What's next? I asked. Raymond stacked the documents into a neat pile and looked at me with 67 years of hard-earned calm. Next we wait for Monday morning, and we see how fast Brandon calls you when he finds out his card doesn't work. Derek drove me there himself. I hadn't planned to go anywhere after Raymond's office. Linda had practically ordered me back to the hotel to rest, and Raymond had made me promise to eat something before 3 o'clock. But at 1:58 p.m., my borrowed phone had rung with a number I recognized immediately, a Portland area code I hadn't seen in almost 2 years. Frank Delano's shop. Walter. Frank's voice was low and careful, the way it got when something was wrong. I need you to come down here. Today. Right now, if you can. I had gripped the phone hard. Frank, what is it? Just come. A pause. And bring somebody with you. Frank Delano had owned the shop on Hawthorne for 22 years. We had grown up 3 blocks apart in Northeast Portland, gone to the same high school, lost touch for decades, then found each other again at a neighborhood association meeting in 2008. He was the kind of man who remembered everything, faces, names, the provenance of objects that passed through his hands. In 22 years of running a pawn shop, Frank had seen most of what human desperation looked like up close. He did not call people and tell them to bring somebody with them unless something serious had walked through his door. The shop bell rang when Derek pushed the door open. Frank was behind the counter, his reading glasses hanging from one hand, and when he saw my face, his own face did something complicated, relief and anger competing for the same space. Walter. He came around the counter and grabbed my hand with both of his. His grip was tight. I'm glad you came fast. What happened, Frank? He didn't answer immediately. He walked back behind the counter, pulled open the glass display case, and set something on the velvet tray in front of me. My knees nearly gave out. It was Eleanor's ring. White gold band, oval sapphire center stone, 2 small diamonds on each side. Eleanor had picked it herself at a shop on Alberta Street in 1974. I had paid for it in installments over 6 months on a street sweeper's salary, $50 a month, walking home instead of taking the bus to save the fare. I had put it on her finger in a courthouse ceremony, with 2 witnesses and a borrowed suit, and Eleanor had worn it every day for 41 years, until the morning she went into the hospital for the last time, and I had taken it off her finger myself, folded it in the handkerchief from my breast pocket, and kept it in my nightstand drawer ever since. My nightstand. In my house. In the drawer on the left side. Frank. My voice had gone completely hollow. When did this come in? Yesterday evening. Frank's jaw was tight. Around 7:30. Young man, early 30s. Told me it was his late mother's ring and he needed quick cash. I gave him $200 because he seemed... Frank stopped. His hand curled on the countertop. Walter, I didn't know. If I had known... You couldn't have known, I said. But my hands were shaking so badly now that Derek reached over and put one hand on my shoulder to steady me. Did he give a name? Frank turned to his computer and pulled up the transaction record. Oregon law required ID for pawn shop sales. The name on the screen made my throat lock shut completely. Brandon R. Hayes. Derek leaned in, read it, and said nothing, but the sound he made low in his chest was enough. He sold it for $200, I said. The words tasted like ash. He took Eleanor's ring out of my nightstand and sold it for $200. Frank pressed his lips together. His eyes were wet at the corners, and Frank Delano was not a man who showed that easily. I'm giving it back to you, Walter. Right now, no charge. I don't care about the 200. That ring is yours. You can't do that, Frank. That's your... Don't you dare argue with me about $200. His voice cracked slightly. I knew, Eleanor. I knew that ring. You take it home. I reached out and picked it up. The metal was cool against my palm. I closed my fingers around it and held it there against the center of my chest, and for a moment I could not speak at all. My eyes were burning so badly, the whole shop went blurry. Frank behind the counter, Derek beside me, the cluttered shelves of other people's surrendered things, and one hot tear made it all the way down the side of my face before I could stop it. Okay, I finally managed. Okay. Derek pulled out his phone. Frank, I need you to make a certified copy of that transaction record. Name, ID, number, timestamp, dollar amount. All of it. Frank was already at the printer. Already running. That's entering a dwelling to commit theft. Derek said, his voice level and professional, the same voice he used when he was filling out an incident report. That's a Class C felony in Oregon, Walter. Breaking and entering plus theft of personal property valued. He looked at the ring in my hand, well above the misdemeanor threshold. I looked down at Eleanor's ring. $200. Brandon had walked into my bedroom, pulled open my nightstand drawer, taken the one thing in that house that had nothing to do with money or property or inheritance, and sold it for $200 and a Friday night. Raymond needs to know, I said. I'm already texting him, Derek said. Frank handed me the printed transaction record in a manila envelope. His hand rested on top of mine for a moment, before he let go. You're going to be all right, Walter, he said. His voice had gone rough. You hear me? I tucked Eleanor's ring carefully into the breast pocket of my borrowed coat, right where her handkerchief used to live, right against my heart. I hear you, Frank. On the way back to this hotel, Derek kept his eyes on the road, and I kept my hand pressed flat against my chest, feeling the small, hard shape of the ring through the fabric. My phone buzzed. A text from a number I didn't recognize, Portland area code. Mr. Hayes, my name is Tommy Briggs. I used to work the night route with you on Division Street. I have a video from last Friday night that I think you need to see. Before I tell you what Tommy's phone recorded that night, and before you hear what my own son said in a voicemail he forgot was being monitored, comment, "Justice," below. Because what comes in the next few minutes is the moment I finally understood the full shape of what had been done to me. And it is worse than you think. A reminder, this story includes fictional elements added for storytelling and reflection. Some details may differ from reality. If you prefer to stop here, that choice is completely yours. Tommy Briggs showed up exactly when he said he would. He knocked 3 times soft, and even the way men knock when they know the person on the other side might not be doing well. When I opened the door, he was standing in the hallway, in his city-issue work jacket. The orange reflective stripe faded from years of night shifts, his cap held in both hands in front of him. He looked older than I remembered, heavier around the jaw, more gray at the temples, but his eyes were the same. Direct, honest. The eyes of a man who had spent 20 years watching the city sleep from the inside of a street sweeper cab and had never once thought less of the work. "Mr. Hayes." His voice came out rough, like he had been rehearsing what to say and still wasn't sure he had it right. "I'm real sorry I didn't call sooner. I didn't know how bad it was until I saw the news alert about an elderly man found unconscious on Morrison, and I put it together." I stepped back and let him in. "Sit down, Tommy." He sat on the edge of the armchair, both hands still working the brim of his cap. Derek was standing by the window. Raymond was on the small desk chair with his laptop open. The room felt crowded in the way that only happens when something important is about to happen inside it. "Tell me what you saw," I said. Tommy pulled out his phone and held it with both hands, steadying himself. "Friday night I was running the Division Street route. My shift starts at 6:30, so I was coming up Maple around 7, maybe 7:10. I saw the lights on in your house and I saw—" He stopped. His jaw worked. "Mr. Hayes, I saw Brandon open the front door and push you off the porch. You didn't fall, but you stumbled pretty bad. You grabbed the railing and he shoved your hand off it." The room went very still. "I filmed it," Tommy said. "I didn't know what I was seeing at first. I thought maybe it was a fight, maybe you'd walk back in. But then Brandon went inside and closed the door, and you just stood there in the rain. No coat. Nothing." His voice cracked on the last word. "I should have stopped. I should have gotten out of that cab. Right then, Mr. Hayes and I am sorry. I told myself maybe it was a family thing. Maybe it wasn't my place." His eyes went red at the corners. "That was wrong. I was wrong." "Tommy." I leaned forward. "You called me. You're here. That's what matters now." He nodded hard, pressed his lips together, held out the phone. "It's 43 seconds. You can see his face. You can see him push you." Derek took the phone first, watched the video twice with the expression of a man building a case in real time. Then he handed it to Raymond, who watched it once and immediately began typing. "Quality is good enough," Raymond said without looking up. "Timestamp is embedded. Combined with the kitchen footage and the living room party footage, we now have a documented sequence: premeditated contamination, physical removal, and celebratory behavior immediately following. That's a complete evidentiary chain." My chest tightened so hard I had to press my fist against my sternum. 43 seconds. The night my son pushed me off my own porch and into the rain existed in 43 seconds of footage on a city sanitation worker's phone. And if Tommy hadn't been on Division Street at 7:10 on a Friday night, it would have been nothing but my word against Brandon's. "There's one more thing," Raymond said. He turned the laptop to face me. I pulled the voicemail records from the joint account's registered phone number. Oregon law allows account holders to request call and voicemail logs as part of a fraud investigation. Walter Brandon left himself a voicemail on Thursday night, the night before the dinner. I stared at him. He left himself a voicemail. People do it sometimes as a reminder, a note to self. Raymond's voice was perfectly level, but there was something underneath it, a tightly controlled fury I had known him long enough to recognize. He forgot the account was flagged for monitoring after you added the fraud alert 2 years ago. Every voicemail on that line was being automatically archived to the account's security log. He pressed play. Brandon's voice filled the small hotel room, tinny through the laptop speakers, but unmistakable. Okay, so tomorrow night, Amber does the water thing before dinner, make sure the old man starts coughing at the table. Then I bring up the flu, the neighborhood cases make it sound like he's a risk. She plays the pregnancy card, I escalate. He gets defensive, and then I tell him to get out. He won't fight it. He never fights. By Saturday morning, we change the locks, and I call the insurance company Monday. It's going to work. It's going to work this time. The recording ended. Tommy made a sound like he'd been punched. His hand went over his mouth. I sat completely still. My hands were flat on my knees, and they were shaking, both of them hard and steady like an engine running too fast. It's going to work this time. This time. As if there had been other times before this. As if Friday night was not a moment of anger or bad judgment, but a plan that had been attempted, refined, and finally executed. He called it the water thing, I said. My voice came out very quiet and very cold. Which means he and Amber discussed it in advance, Raymond said. Amber was not acting independently. Brandon was not manipulated by Amber. Brandon recruited Amber. He designed the plan. She executed the kitchen piece. He executed the removal. Raymond took off his glasses and set them on the desk. Walter, your son is not a man who got swept up in something. Your son built this. The words landed in my chest like stones dropping into deep water, one after another, sinking slow and heavy and without bottom. Tommy stood up abruptly, walked to the window, put his back to the room. His shoulders were shaking. I drove past that house every Friday night for 3 years, he said, his voice thick. You always had the porch light on. Always. I know, I said. He turned the porch light off Friday night. Tommy's voice broke open completely. First time in 3 years that light was off. Nobody spoke for a moment. Not because there was nothing to say, but because some things need a breath of space before you can move past them. Derek broke it first. Raymond, how fast can we file the criminal complaint combining the theft of the ring, the physical removal, and the voicemail evidence? I can have the package to the DA's office by Tuesday morning, Raymond said. But there's something else I want to run down first. Something about Amber that came up when I was pulling her background for the trespass filing. He looked at me steadily. I need 1 more day. Can you give me 1 more day? I looked at Eleanor's ring on the nightstand, where I had set it the night before so I could see it when I woke up. Take whatever you need, I said. Raymond had been at his desk since 6 in the morning. I could tell by the number of coffee cups, 3 of them lined up along the edge of the desk, in a neat row like evidence markers, and by the particular quality of his stillness when I walked in, the stillness of a man who has been reading for a very long time and has arrived somewhere he didn't entirely want to arrive. Derek was already there, standing by the bookcase with his arms crossed, his face carrying that careful, blank expression that I had come to understand meant he was angry and managing it with great precision. Sit down, Walter, Raymond said. I sat. Tell me. Raymond opened the folder on his desk and turned it to face me. There was a photograph clipped to the top, a woman I didn't recognize, heavy-set, gray-haired, standing in front of a Miami Beach condo building. Beneath the photograph was a name, Helen Marsh, 79, deceased, March 2022. Her name was Helen Marsh, Raymond said. Retired schoolteacher. Widowed in 2019. No children. She owned a condo in Miami Beach worth approximately $340,000 and had a savings portfolio of around $180,000. In January 2021, she hired a personal care assistant through a private placement agency. He paused. The assistant's name at the time was listed as Amber Joanne Whitfield. The name hit me like cold water. Whitfield, not Hayes, a different name, a previous name. Amber used her maiden name, I asked. Or an alias we're still confirming with Florida records. But the photograph from the agency file matches Amber's DMV photo within acceptable facial recognition parameters. Raymond's finger moved down the page. Over 14 months, Helen Marsh transferred approximately $210,000 to a personal account in the name of Whitfield. The transfers were characterized as gifts in the paperwork. Helen's remaining estate, including the condo, was redirected to a newly formed LLC also registered under Whitfield 3 weeks before Helen was moved into a memory care facility. My stomach turned over slowly. Helen Marsh died 11 months after she was moved into that facility, Raymond continued. The cause of death was listed as rapid onset dementia complications. Her two closest friends filed a complaint with the Florida Department of Elder Affairs in April 2022. The investigation was opened, assigned to a caseworker, and then Raymond's jaw tightened. It stalled. The LLC had already been dissolved. The money was gone. Amber had already left Florida. Derek uncrossed his arms and put both hands flat on the bookcase shelf behind him. She came to Portland, he said. Where she met Brandon, I said. The shape of it was so clear now that looking at it felt like looking at something I should have seen a long time ago. Not because there were signs I missed. There weren't, not ones I could have caught. But because the architecture of it was so deliberate, so practiced, that it made Friday night look less like a crime of opportunity and more like the third or fourth iteration of something Amber had been perfecting for years. She knew what she was doing, I said. My voice came out flat. She's done this before. At minimum once that we can document, Raymond said. Derek has a contact at the Miami-Dade Elder Crimes Unit who pulled the original complaint file. The investigator who worked it, a woman named Detective Sandra Ruiz, has been trying to locate Amber Whitfield for the better part of 2 years. She's going to want to talk to us, Derek said. His voice had a restrained energy in it, the kind that comes right before something moves fast. I called her this morning. She picks up on the first ring when you mention that name. Raymond slid a second document across the desk. I also found this. A civil judgment in Broward County 2020, a different case, an elderly man named George Weston, 81. He filed and then withdrew the complaint 6 weeks later. His family told the court he had changed his mind. He died 4 months after withdrawing. I pressed my hand over my mouth. My eyes were stinging so badly that the documents in front of me went soft at the edges. She moves from city to city, I said, my voice muffled behind my hand. She finds men like me, old men, alone, with assets, and she builds a relationship, Raymond said, his voice carefully steady, carrying it for me when mine couldn't. She establishes trust through someone close to the target, in Helen Marsh's case, direct employment. In your case, through your son. She isolates the asset. She redirects it. And when the situation becomes legally precarious, she moves on. I dropped my hand from my mouth and pressed it flat against my chest instead. My heart was hammering hard enough that I could feel it against my palm. Brandon doesn't know any of this, I said. Almost certainly not, Raymond said. Brandon is greedy and weak, and he made choices that will cost him. But Amber chose Brandon because he was greedy and weak and easy to shape. He thought he was using her. She was using him. Across the desk, Derek let out a long, controlled breath. Detective Ruiz is flying in Wednesday morning, he said. She wants to interview you, Walter. She wants to see the kitchen footage, the voicemail, the pawn shop record. She's been building a multi-state pattern file on Amber for 2 years. Your case might be the one that finally closes it. I looked at the photograph of Helen Marsh standing in front of her Miami Beach condo, a small, smiling woman who had taught school for 30 years, lost her husband, and then spent the last months of her life in a memory care facility while the woman who had stolen everything she owned walked away clean. My throat ached. "I want to help," I said. "Whatever Detective Ruiz needs, whatever gives Helen Marsh's story an ending." Raymond closed the folder with both hands firmly. "Then we give it one." He looked at Derek. "How's the eviction timeline?" 30-day notice goes out today, Derek said. "Monday morning certified mail. Brandon and Amber will have it in their hands by noon." I thought about Brandon in my house right now, in my kitchen at my table, maybe sleeping in my bed, completely unaware that somewhere across the city, the entire weight of what he had built was beginning to shift. "Does he know yet about the frozen accounts?" I asked. Derek's expression moved into something that wasn't quite a smile, but was in the same neighborhood. His card was declined at a gas station on Sunday morning. He called the bank 3 times. They told him to contact the account holder. A pause. "He hasn't called you yet?" "Not yet," I said. "He will," Raymond said. "They always do when the money stops." Outside Raymond's window, Portland was gray and wet and ordinary. The Monday morning traffic moving slowly through streets still damp from the weekend rain. Somewhere across this city, my son was going to open a certified letter today. And somewhere in Miami, Detective Sandra Ruiz was already packing for a Wednesday flight to Portland. Amber had run from Florida thinking she was clean. She hadn't counted on an old man who refused to die quietly on a bus stop bench. The call came at 12:47. I was sitting at the small desk by the window, eating the sandwich Linda had brought up from the lobby cafe, turkey on wheat, the kind of meal you eat because you know you need to, not because you want to. Raymond was on the armchair with his reading glasses on, going through the DA filing documents one last time. Derek was leaning against the wall by the door with a cup of coffee and the particular stillness of a man who had been expecting something or several hours and was simply waiting for it to arrive. My phone buzzed on the desk. The screen lit up. Brandon Hayes. Raymond looked up over his glasses. Derek set his coffee down on the dresser without making a sound. Neither of them said anything. They didn't need to. I let it ring 4 times. Then I picked up. "Brandon." There was a half-second of silence on the other end. The silence of someone who had expected a very different energy and was recalibrating fast. Then his voice came through higher than usual, with a tight, strained quality around the edges. "Dad, I got a letter today from some lawyer named Jill. It says I have 30 days to vacate the property." "Dad, what is this? What is going on?" I kept my voice completely level. "It means what it says." "What it? Dad, that's our house. That's my house. You can't just—" "It's my house, Brandon." The words came out quiet and precise, each one placed carefully. "It has always been my house. Your name has never been on the title. I had Raymond pull the county records. Would you like the document number?" A sharp intake of breath on the other end. "Then you went and got a lawyer against your own son." "My own son pushed me off a porch in the rain on Friday night," I said. "Without a coat, without a phone, without $1 in my pocket. So yes, I got a lawyer, Dad. I was scared the flu the whole neighborhood has been. Amber was worried about the baby. Amber is not pregnant." My voice stayed even. "I know that, Brandon. I've known it since Saturday." The line went very quiet. I could hear his breathing fast, shallow, the breathing of a man standing at the edge of something he hadn't expected to reach this quickly. "I also know," I continued, "that at 5:49 p.m. on Friday evening, before I came downstairs for dinner, Amber put something in my water glass from a bottle she took from my supplement cabinet. I watched her do it on the kitchen camera. 40 seconds, Brandon." She measured it out. That's not, you can't prove." "I have the footage." I paused. "I also have the voicemail you left yourself on Thursday night. The one where you walk through the whole plan. The water thing, the pregnancy card, changing the locks Saturday morning." Another pause. "It's going to work this time," you said. The breathing on the other end stopped entirely for a moment. Then Brandon's voice came back, and it had changed completely. The high, strained indignation was gone. What replaced it was something younger and raw and far less prepared. Dad, just that word, cracked straight down the middle. My chest tightened until it hurt. I pressed my free hand flat against the desk. The joint checking account is frozen, I said. My pension deposits will no longer go into that account. Raymond is filing criminal charges this week: theft of personal property, entering a dwelling without consent, and financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. That last one carries up to 5 years in Oregon. Criminal charges. Brandon's voice had dropped to almost nothing. Dad, you're going to have me arrested. I'm going to let the law do what it does, I said. The same law I worked alongside for 30 years, pushing a broom through the streets of this city at 3 in the morning so that you could have a warm house and a full refrigerator and every chance I never had. A sound came through the phone, then something between a gasp and a sob, something that I recognized because I had heard it a long time ago when Brandon was 9 years old and had broken Eleanor's favorite vase and tried to hide the pieces under his bed, and cried when she found them, not because he was in trouble, but because he had seen the look on her face. My eyes burned. I pressed them shut for exactly 3 seconds. You have 30 days, I said. Use them to make arrangements. Don't damage the property. Don't remove anything that isn't yours. A beat. And Brandon, the ring, Eleanor's ring. I have it back. Frank Delano called me Saturday. The sob that came through the phone that time was not small and not hidden. I needed the money, Brandon said, his voice shattered. The accounts were all ready. Amber said we needed. I know what Amber said. My voice tightened just slightly. I know exactly what Amber said and when she said it. So does a detective from Miami who is flying in on Wednesday. Silence. The kind that comes when the floor drops out. Miami. Brandon's voice had gone completely hollow. Call a lawyer, Brandon, I said. Get yourself a real one, not the one Amber recommends. I paused. That's the last free advice I'm going to give you. I ended the call and set the phone face down on the desk. The room was very quiet for a moment. Raymond had taken his glasses off entirely. Derek had both hands in his pockets and was looking at the floor. Then Derek said quietly, "You all right?" I sat back in the chair. My hands had stopped shaking for the first time in 4 days. Outside the window, Portland was doing what Portland did. Gray sky, wet streets, ordinary life. Moving past without comment. My sandwich was still on the desk, half-eaten turkey on wheat. "I'm all right," I said, and I almost meant it. Raymond reached into his briefcase and pulled out a fresh folder. "Wednesday morning," he said. 9 a.m. Detective Ruiz lands at PDX at 8:15. Derek is picking her up. He set the folder on the desk in front of me. "Walter, I need you to go through this evidence package tonight and confirm every item. When Ruiz sits across from you Wednesday, I want you ready." I pulled the folder toward me and opened the first page. Amber Joanne Whitfield. Amber Joanne Hayes. 2 names for the same woman. 2 cities. 2 old people whose lives she had walked through like a fire through dry grass, taking everything and leaving nothing but the damage behind. Helen Marsh had no one left to speak for her. I was going to speak for her anyway. Detective Sandra Ruiz was not what I expected. I had built a picture of her in my mind during the 2 days between Monday's phone call and Wednesday morning. Someone hard-edged and institutional, the kind of person who had been chasing the same case for 2 years and had gone a little cold from the waiting. What walked through Raymond's office door at 9:47 was a woman of about 50, compact and dark-haired, with the kind of eyes that moved over a room and cataloged it in one sweep. She wore a gray blazer over a white shirt and carried a leather document case that was visibly full. She shook Raymond's hand, then Derek's, then turned to me. "Mr. Hayes." Her handshake was firm and brief. "I've been hoping to find you for a while now. I just didn't expect it to happen this way." "Sit down, detective," I said. "I'll tell you everything." She sat across from me at Raymond's conference table, opened her document case, and laid out her own folders with the practiced efficiency of someone who had done this in a lot of different cities. Then she looked at me steadily and said, "Tell me about Friday night, from the beginning." So I did. I told her about the water glass and the bottle, about Brandon's voice at dinner, the way it had been rehearsed, the particular cadence of someone saying lines they had practiced, about the porch and the rain and the 40 minutes I spent walking wet streets with no coat and no phone before my knees gave out at the Morrison Street bus shelter. I told her about Derek finding me and Linda's iPad, and Raymond's office, and Frank Delano's phone call, and Eleanor's ring. Detective Ruiz did not interrupt me once. She wrote in a small notebook with a mechanical pencil, her handwriting tight and fast, and when I finished, she looked up and said, "The kitchen footage. Can I see it?" Derek set up the iPad on the conference table. We watched it together. Ruiz Raymond. Derek and me, all four of us, looking at those 40 seconds of amber at the supplement cabinet, the careful tilt of the bottle, the single-finger swirl of my water glass. Ruiz watched it twice. Then she closed her notebook, set her pencil down flat, and pressed both hands together on the table in front of her. Her jaw was tight. "The woman in that footage," she said, her voice controlled and precise, "operated under the name Amber Whitfield in Miami-Dade and Broward counties between 2020 and early 2023. I have been looking for her since April 2022. "Helen Marsh," I said. Something moved across Ruiz's face, not surprise, but a kind of recognition, the look of someone hearing a name that has been living in their chest for a long time. "You know about Helen." Raymond found the complaint file. Ruiz nodded. Helen Marsh was 79 years old. She had a master's degree in education. She spent 30 years teaching third grade in Coral Gables. After her husband died, she was lonely, and she was generous, and she trusted people who seemed kind. Her voice stayed level, but her hand on the table pressed down slightly harder. By the time her friends filed the complaint, she had been moved to a facility. Her accounts were empty. Her condo was gone, and Amber Whitfield had left the state. A pause. Helen died 8 months later. The attending physician attributed it to rapid dementia progression. Helen's closest friend, a woman named Barbara Cole, no relation to Derek, told me that Helen had been sharp and active until the day Amber entered her life. The room felt very heavy. "You think she was drugged?" I said. The words came out flat because saying them any other way was more than I could manage right now. "I think the pattern of cognitive decline was unusually rapid and unusually convenient for the person who stood to benefit from it," Ruiz said carefully. "We couldn't prove it in Florida. The money was gone. The LLC dissolved the medical records inconclusive." She looked at the iPad on the table. "But this..." She tapped the screen. "This is the first time I have documented footage of her administering a substance to a target. This changes what I can do." My eyes were burning again. I pressed my thumb and forefinger against the bridge of my nose for a moment, hard enough to feel it. "Helen deserved better," I said. "Yes, she did." Ruiz's voice had gone quieter. "Mr. Hayes, with your footage, your voicemail evidence, the pawnshop record, Tommy Briggs's video, and the Florida complaint file, I can build a multi-state elder exploitation case. That's federal jurisdiction. That takes it out of Oregon County Court and puts it in front of a U.S. attorney." She looked at Raymond. "How solid is your evidence chain?" Raymond opened his folder with the precision of a man who had been waiting for exactly this question. "Every item is time-stamped, witnessed, and preserved on a secure cloud server with access logs. The voicemail was obtained through the account holder's legal right to request records, no warrant needed. The pawnshop transaction is a matter of public record with state ID verification. The camera footage was installed by and belongs to Mr. Hayes on property that is legally and solely his." He looked up. "It's solid, detective. Every piece of it. Ruiz looked at me. I need you to be prepared for this to take time, Mr. Hayes. Federal cases move slowly. There will be interviews, depositions, hearings. It will not be over in a week. I'm 75 years old, I said. I've been patient my whole life. I can be patient a little longer. Something in Ruiz's expression shifted, not softened exactly, but opened slightly, the way a door opens just enough to let light through. I'm going to need formal statements from Derek Tommy Briggs, Frank Delano, and Nurse Linda Marsh. Can you coordinate that? Already started, Derek said. Ruiz gathered her documents, slid them back into the case, and stood. But before she turned to leave, she looked at me one more time. Mr. Hayes, you were found unconscious at a bus stop in the rain at 11 o'clock on a Friday night. Most men your age in that condition, in that weather. She stopped. You shouldn't be sitting here. I know, I said. Helen Marsh wasn't able to sit across from me and tell me what happened to her, Ruiz said. You are. That matters. She shook my hand again, and this time she held it just a fraction of a second longer. After she left, the office was very quiet. Derek was looking out the window. Raymond was recapping his pen with slow, deliberate movements. Outside, Portland traffic moved in its ordinary way, people going to ordinary places for ordinary reasons, the whole city moving forward on its unremarkable Wednesday. I sat at Raymond's conference table, with my hands flat on the polished wood, and felt something shift in the very deep center of my chest. Something that had been locked and braced and holding itself rigid since Friday night, and very slowly, degree by degree, begin to release. Not over, not even close to over, but moving, finally irrevocably moving in the right direction. My phone buzzed. Raymond looked at the screen before I did. Brandon again, he said. Let it go to voicemail, I said. Raymond allowed himself the smallest, most controlled smile I had ever seen on his face. Good man. Barbara Cole had driven herself from PDX Airport to Raymond's office in a rental car, and she had arrived 12 minutes early. She was 68 years old, small-framed with white hair cut short and reading glasses on a beaded chain around her neck. She wore a navy cardigan and sensible shoes and carried a canvas tote bag that had a Miami Public Library logo on the side. She looked like someone's grandmother. She looked like the kind of woman who brought casseroles to sick neighbors and remembered every child's birthday on her block. She also looked like someone who had been waiting 2 years for this specific room, this specific table, and this specific moment. Mr. Hayes, she said when Raymond introduced us. She took both my hands in hers and held them. Her grip was stronger than I expected. Sandra Ruiz told me what happened to you. I am so sorry. Her voice was warm and direct with a slight Florida softness to the vowels. And I am so glad you are sitting here. I'm glad too, Ms. Cole, I said. We sat down together, and Barbara opened her canvas tote and pulled out a photograph. She set it on the table between us and smoothed it flat with her palm, the way you handle something precious. It was Helen Marsh. Younger than the DMV photo Raymond had shown me, this one was from maybe 5 years ago, outdoors somewhere. Sunny, laughing at something off camera, her hair still mostly brown, a glass of iced tea in her hand. She looked like a woman in full possession of her life. That was taken at her retirement party, Barbara said. Her voice stayed steady, but just barely. Helen taught 3rd grade for 31 years. She said the secret to teaching 8-year-olds was to always act like whatever they showed you was the most interesting thing you'd ever seen. A small breath. She was the best person I knew. My throat tightened. I kept my eyes on the photograph. Tell me what you saw, I said. Barbara folded her hands on the table. Amber came into Helen's life in January of 2021. She was hired through a placement agency, personal care assistant, light housekeeping companionship. Helen had been lonely since Robert died, and Amber was... She paused, choosing the word carefully. Magnetic, warm, attentive. She remembered things. Helen's favorite flowers, the name of Helen's childhood dog. She made Helen feel seen. Raymond was writing steadily. Detective Ruiz, sitting at the corner of the table, had her notebook open. "When did things change?" Ruiz asked. "Gradually," Barbara said. "That's what made it so hard to see. At first it was just Helen seemed tired more often. She'd forget things she never used to forget. She started canceling our Thursday lunches. Said she wasn't feeling well, said Amber was helping her rest." Barbara's jaw tightened. "Every time I called, Amber answered the phone first. Every time I visited, Amber was there. Always helpful. Always smiling." Her voice had gone hard and quiet. She was building a wall around Helen, and she was doing it so carefully that it looked like care. I pressed my hand flat on the table. My chest felt like something was sitting on it. "By fall of 2021, Barbara continued, Helen had signed over power of attorney to Amber. Her financial advisor told me later that Helen had seemed confused during the signing. Distracted. Not herself." She stopped, pressed her lips together hard. "I tried to intervene. I called the agency. I called Helen's doctor. Everyone said she seemed fine in their presence. Amber was always there in their presence." Her voice cracked on the last word. "By the time I got a lawyer involved, the accounts were empty, and Amber was gone." The room was very quiet. "Ms. Cole," I said. My voice came out rougher than I intended. "Did Helen ever tell you anything? In those last months, did she say anything about Amber that didn't add up?" Barbara looked at me, and something in her face shifted, grief and fury moving together in the same expression, tangled up so tight you couldn't separate them. "The last time I spoke to Helen alone, really alone without Amber somewhere nearby, was October 2021. We were on the phone for maybe 10 minutes before Amber came back into the room, and Helen changed completely. Like a switch." She stopped. "But in those 10 minutes, Helen said something. She said, 'Barb, I've been so tired lately. Amber gives me these vitamins every morning, and I sleep so much.' And then she laughed like it was nothing, like it was a good thing." The photograph of Helen in the sunshine sat between us on the table, and I looked at it and thought about a 40-second clip on a kitchen camera and my water glass and a small amber bottle. My eyes were burning so badly I had to look at the ceiling for a moment. "Same thing," I said. My voice was barely above a whisper. "She did the same thing." Barbara nodded, and this time she could not keep her face entirely together. Her chin trembled once hard before she controlled it. "That's why I flew here, Mr. Hayes. Because if someone finally has the footage, the evidence, the whole documented chain, then Helen deserves to have her name in that file. She deserves to have someone say out loud what was done to her." Across the table, Raymond set his pen down for the first time since we had started. He looked at Barbara, then at me, then he said, "Her name will be in every filing. I will make certain of it." Barbara pressed both hands flat on the table and breathed out. "Thank you." My phone buzzed. Raymond's assistant's number. I stepped out to take it. "Mr. Hayes." Her voice was careful. "I just got a notification from the county court filing system. Someone filed an emergency motion this morning to contest the property title on your home. The filer is listed as Amber Hayes, represented by a firm called Dunmore and Associates." My hand tightened on the phone. "She's fighting back," I said. "She's scared," Raymond said from the doorway where he had followed me out. He had clearly heard the call. His voice was entirely calm. "Scared people make moves they haven't thought all the way through." He took the phone gently from my hand and looked at the notification himself. "Dunmore and Associates. That's a real estate dispute firm. She's trying to claim spousal cohabitation rights." He handed the phone back. "She has no legal ground, Walter. None. But she's going to try to delay." I looked back through the office window at Barbara Cole, who was sitting at the table with her hands folded, and Helen Marsh's photograph in front of her, waiting with the patience of someone who had been waiting a very long time already. "She can try," I said. Day 22 of 30. Raymond had scheduled the morning as what he called a convergence meeting. Every thread of every legal action laid out on the conference table at once, organized by urgency and sequence, the way a surgeon lays out instruments before an operation. Derek was there. Detective Ruiz was there by phone from Miami, her voice coming through Raymond's conference speaker with the slight delay of a long-distance call. I was there with Eleanor's ring on my right hand where I had moved it the morning after Frank gave it back to me. I had not taken it off since. Outside, Portland had gone properly cold for December. The kind of cold that settles in and means business. "All right," Raymond said, uncapping his pen and looking down the table. "3 things happened today, in sequence. I need everyone's confirmation on each before we move." Derek nodded once. Ruiz said, "Go ahead," through the speaker. "First," Raymond said, "the life insurance policy." He slid the document across the table to me. I had signed it 2 weeks ago in this same office, the beneficiary change form for the Sun Life policy number, ending in 4471, $800,000 30-year policy, the one I had been paying into since Brandon was 2 years old, the one that Brandon had been counting on since the moment he started planning Friday night. Sun Life confirmed the change was processed and recorded on November 9th, Raymond said. The new beneficiary is the Morrison Bridge Community Fund. The change is irrevocable and filed with the State Insurance Commissioner. He looked at me steadily. Brandon Hayes has no claim to a single dollar of that policy. As of right now, he knows he never will. I let that settle for a moment. $800,000. Brandon had thrown his 75-year-old father into a November rainstorm for $800,000, and now that money was going to a community fund in the neighborhood where I had spent 30 years sweeping streets at 3 in the morning. "How does he find out?" I asked. "He already has," Raymond said. He pulled a printed email from the folder. Sun Life is required to notify the previous beneficiary of a completed change. The notification went to Brandon's email address on November 10th. He is known for 3 weeks. Raymond paused. His lawyer, he finally hired one, a general practice attorney named Mark Sherwood, contacted me yesterday, asking if the change could be contested. I informed Mr. Sherwood that the change was made by the sole policyholder while in full legal capacity, witnessed and notarized, and that there is no basis for contest under Oregon insurance law. "What did Sherwood say?" Derek asked. "He said he'd need to consult with his client." Raymond's voice was perfectly dry. "I expect we won't hear from him again on that particular matter." The second item was the property title. Raymond had filed this counter-motion to Amber's emergency claim on Friday afternoon, and Judge Patricia Hartwell, the same judge who had frozen the joint account, had ruled on it Monday morning in less than 18 hours. Raymond turned the ruling to face me across the table, and I read the key line twice. "The property located at 4412 S.E. Maple Street, Portland, Oregon, is held in sole title by Walter James Hayes. No cohabitation claim spousal or otherwise establishes legal ownership. The emergency motion filed by Amber Hayes is dismissed with prejudice." Dismissed with prejudice, meaning she could not file the same argument again. I read that line a third time. Then I set the document down and pressed both hands flat on the table and breathed. "Amber's lawyer from Dunmore and Associates withdrew from the case yesterday afternoon," Raymond said. "I was informed this morning. Apparently the firm discovered the Florida complaint file through the federal filing and decided they did not want to be associated with this particular client." Through the conference speaker, Ruiz made a sound that was not quite a laugh, but was close. "That'll do it every time." "Third item," Raymond said, and his voice shifted slightly. The same shift I had learned to recognize as the one that meant the most significant thing was last. "Derek." Derek leaned forward. "Kyle Merritt, 31 years old, Amber's first cousin on her mother's side. He came to Portland 3 weeks ago. We flagged his name when Ruiz ran Amber's known associates through the system. He set his own folder on the table. Kyle has 2 prior drug distribution charges in Broward County, both pleaded down. He's been in contact with Amber by phone 17 times in the last 30 days. We have the records through the federal monitoring order Ruiz obtained. A pause. At 6:15 this morning, my partner and I stopped Kyle Merritt on the Morrison Bridge with 40 grams of controlled substance. He is currently in custody. The room was very still. He's Amber's cousin, I said slowly. The same cousin you were chasing that night 12 years ago on Burnside Street. The night you kept me alive, Derek said. His voice was completely level, but something in his eyes was not. Yes, same man, different charge. He rolled on Amber inside of 2 hours, gave us phone records, text messages, and a recorded conversation from 10 days ago in which Amber discusses, and I'm quoting from the transcript, making sure the old man doesn't have anything left to fight with before the 30 days are up. My heart hammered so hard I could feel it in my ears. She was planning something, I said, for before the eviction date. We believe she was planning to access the house while you were away from it and remove documents, financial records, possibly damage the property to depress its value for any legal dispute. Derek's jaw tightened. Kyle was her logistics. He knew the neighborhood, knew the schedule, knew which entry point to use. A beat. He won't be available for that anymore. Through the speaker, Ruiz's voice came through, quiet and precise. With Kyle Merritt's recorded statement, the Florida pattern evidence, the kitchen footage, the voicemail, and the property ruling, I am filing the federal multi-state elder exploitation charge against Amber Joanne Hayes, née Whitfield, today. The U.S. Attorney's Office in Oregon has accepted jurisdiction. A pause. Mr. Hayes, this is no longer a civil matter. I sat back in my chair. 22 days ago, I had been an old man in a flannel shirt eating a Friday dinner, and the most complicated thing in my life was whether my left knee would hold on the stairs. Now I was sitting in a lawyer's office in December with a federal case, a dismissed property motion, an irrevocable insurance change, and a woman's cousin in police custody, and the 30-day clock on my house had 8 days left to run. When Amber finds out about Kyle, I said, she's going to panic. Yes, Raymond said, and when she panics, she'll make a mistake. Raymond capped his pen. She already has. Several of them. We've simply been documenting each one as it arrives. He stacked the 3 documents into a single neat pile and set them in the center of the table. 3 moves. Insurance, property, arrest. Each one a door closing. Each one a lock turning. 8 days left. My right hand moved without thinking to Eleanor's ring, turning it slowly around my finger, the way I used to turn it when I was working through something difficult. The same habit I'd had for 41 years, just on a different hand now. Raymond, I said, what happens on day 30? He looked at me across the table with 67 years of hard-earned steadiness and said, on day 30, Walter, you go home. Day 30, I woke up before the alarm. Derek was standing in the hotel lobby when I came downstairs, full uniform, cap in hand, back straight. I stopped walking when I saw him. My throat tightened all the way up. You didn't have to, I started. I wanted to, he said simply. He took my bag before I could argue. Raymond is already at the house. Tommy, too. Frank drove over this morning. Maggie Brooks has been on her porch since 8:15. My eyes burned. I turned toward the glass door to hide it. When Derek turned onto Maple Street, I saw them. Raymond in his long overcoat. Tommy in his city jacket. Frank with both hands in his pockets, Maggie in her red wool coat waving with both arms the moment she saw the car. And I saw my house. Porch light off. Exactly like Tommy said. 30 nights and nobody had thought to turn it on. I would fix that tonight. Derek knocked 3 firm official strikes, the kind that come from a man in uniform who is here because it matters. Brandon opened the door. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in a week. Eyes red at the rims, face hollowed out, wearing the gray hoodie I bought him 4 Christmases ago. He looked at me, then at Derek in full uniform, then back at me, and his face collapsed completely slowly, the way a structure finally admits it cannot hold itself together anymore. "Dad." His voice came out as nothing more than breath. "Brandon." I kept my voice level. "Is everything packed?" He nodded. "Amber left last night. She didn't say where she was going." Detective Ruiz stepped up from behind me. "Amber Joanne Hayes was taken into custody at Portland International Airport 40 minutes ago. Federal charges." She looked at Brandon steadily. "Your attorney will receive the notification today." Brandon's hand tightened on the doorframe. He made a sound that wasn't quite a word, hollow and airless, like something being emptied out. Then he looked straight into my eyes and said, "Dad, I'm sorry. I know it's not enough, but I'm sorry." My chest tightened until it actually hurt. "I heard you," I said. Just that. Nothing more, nothing less, because that was everything I could honestly give right now without lying. Brandon lifted 2 duffel bags onto his shoulders and walked down the porch steps. At the bottom step, he stopped, his back still to me. "The porch light bulb burned out 2 weeks ago," he said. "I didn't replace it. I should have." Then he walked to his car. I stepped across the threshold of my own house. Maggie came at me before I could take a breath. Both arms locked around my shoulders, her whole body shaking, crying openly, and not trying to hide a single tear. "Welcome home, Walter. Welcome home." I held on tight. My eyes burned until everything went soft at the edges. After a moment, I straightened up, looked around at Raymond, Tommy, Frank, Derek, all of them in my hallway in my house, and said, "Somebody help me find a light bulb." Tommy laughed first, then Frank, then even Raymond. I went to find the porch light. Spring came quietly to Maple Street. The plum tree in my front yard had gone pink overnight, and the whole block smelled like wet soil and something beginning again. I had been watching it from the porch since early morning, the way the blossoms held the gray light, the way the branches moved in the March wind without breaking. Some things know how to survive a hard winter without making a performance of it. I was on my second cup of coffee when the mail carrier came up the walk. Bills, a hardware flyer, and one handwritten envelope at the bottom of the stack, the kind that takes a moment to register because you are not expecting it. Brandon's handwriting. No return address. My name written in the careful, deliberate way he used to write it as a boy when he was trying to show he had taken his time. I set the other mail on the railing and opened it. "Dad, I've been trying to write this for 3 months. 11 drafts deleted. I don't know if this one says the right thing either. The community service started in January. Morrison Bridge District. Street cleaning. The court assigned it. I didn't ask. But I've been out there at 6 in the morning with a broom in the cold, and I keep thinking about what your nights looked like for 30 years, what the streets looked like at 3 in the morning, what it costs a man to do that work year after year while the city sleeps. I didn't think about it enough before. I didn't think about you enough before. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I know what I did, and I know what it cost you. And I'm not going to insult either of us by pretending a letter fixes that. I just need you to know that the man who put his hands on your chest and pushed you off that porch is not who I want to be. I don't fully understand yet how I became him, but I'm working on that. Every Monday and Thursday morning on Morrison Bridge, I'm working on that. Brandon, I read it twice, folded it along its original crease, held it flat on my knee, with both hands the way you hold something you are not yet ready to put away and not yet ready to act on. The wind moved through the plum tree. A blossom came loose and drifted down to the porch step, pale pink against the gray wood. My phone buzzed. "Derek." Ruiz called. "Amber's arraignment is April 3rd. Federal. Florida DA is filing separately for the Marsh estate. How are you doing?" I looked at the question for a moment before I typed back, "On the porch. Coffee. Plum tree is blooming. His reply came in 3 seconds. Good. That's good, Walter. I set the phone on the railing beside my cup. Amber's case had grown far beyond my November rainstorm. Detective Ruiz had filed the multi-state pattern documentation through the federal system, each piece of evidence building on the last, the way a careful person builds anything slowly, solidly, without shortcuts. Barbara Cole had given a 3-hour deposition in February, sitting in a federal courthouse in Portland, and saying Helen Marsh's name clearly and repeatedly until it finally occupied the space it had always deserved. I had read the transcript twice. Barbara had not wavered once. Helen deserved every one of those hours. She deserved every page of that transcript. The front door opened behind me. Maggie Brooks came out in her red wool coat, carrying a plate covered with a dish towel, moving with the particular certainty of a woman who has decided what needs to happen next and sees no reason to discuss it. She set the plate on the railing. I made biscuits. Move your coffee. Good morning, Maggie, I said. Eat first, talk later. She pulled up the second porch chair, settled into it, and looked at the plum tree with deep and uncomplicated satisfaction. Tommy called earlier. The city is doing a service recognition ceremony in April. 30-plus years of sanitation work. He put your name in. My chest did the warm, complicated thing it had been doing more often lately, a feeling I did not entirely have a name for something between gratitude and grief, and something else that lived past both of them. I've been retired 4 years, Maggie. Tommy said it doesn't matter. She lifted the dish towel off the biscuits. He's right. I reached for one, still warm against my palm. And then something rose up from somewhere deep in my chest, unexpected, unstoppable, rising through everything that had happened since November, and coming out the only way it could, and I laughed. The real kind. The kind that does not negotiate or apologize or ask anyone's permission. Maggie grinned at me like that was precisely what she had come for. I tucked Brandon's letter into my shirt pocket when I was done eating, pressing it flat against my chest beside where Eleanor's ring rested on the nights I did not wear it to bed. Not forgiven yet. Not forgotten. Carried the way you carry things that are too heavy to put down and too important to throw away, the way a man carries everything that has made him the good and the broken and the survived. Above the front door, the porch light burned steady in the March morning. It had been on every single night since December 11th. That was enough. My name is Walter Hayes. I am 75 years old, and I swept the streets of this city for 30 years so my son could have a better life than mine. He used that life to throw me into the rain. I have thought a long time about what this story means. Not the legal part, the lawyers and the cameras and the federal charges. The part underneath all of that. The part that sits with you at 3 in the morning when the house is quiet and the porch light is on. Here is what I believe: God does not abandon people at bus stops. He sends a police officer who remembers a debt. He sends a neighbor with a warm coat. He works slowly and sometimes painfully, but he does not leave you in the rain forever. If you are watching this and you have an elderly parent, please hear me. Do not wait until they are gone to treat them like they mattered. This is a family story as old as grief itself, and it does not have to be yours. Do not be like my son. Do not be like Amber. If you recognize yourself somewhere in these grandpa stories, do better. Today, before it is too late to go back. My personal opinion: greed does not make you wealthy. It makes you a man walking away from everything he destroyed, carrying 2 bags and nothing else. If these grandpa stories moved something in you, leave a comment and tell me what it was. Share this family story with someone who needs to hear it. And if you believe grandpa stories like this one deserve to be told, subscribe, because there are more coming. This has been a family story about betrayal, survival, and an old man who refused to disappear quietly. To everyone who stayed until the very end, thank you. From the bottom of this old man's heart, thank you. One last thing: the stories ahead contain some fictional elements built purely for reflection, and life lessons. If that is not the content for you, no hard feelings, step away and find what serves you better. But if you stay, I will make it worth your time.